It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of April 19th, 2002. We got 3 films to look at today, and let's go ahead and start off with the movie that you would think would be the biggest new release of the weekend, but wait until we get to the end, and you'll see why. We have the spin-off of the Mummy franchise with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, The Rock, as he was called back then, in The Scorpion King. So The Scorpion King takes place 5,000 years before the events of The Mummy, and The Mummy returns and reveals the origins of Matthias, the Scorpion King, and his rise to power as the legendary hero. And the name is a reference to an historical king of the proto-dynastic period of Egypt, King Scorpion. And directed by Chuck Russell, who did The Mask, he did the 80s version of The Blob, so he's made some good movies. And the Mummy movies are fun films. They're fun, the first 2 are at least fun for what they are. This one in particular is, I'd say it's about as fun as the other ones. I mean, it delivers what it promises. You get more of Dwayne Johnson as the Scorpion King, and it knows exactly what its target audience is. It's an action-packed adventure, but it knows it can be really silly and over the top and make it usually work. That's what made the first 2 Mummy movies work as well as they did, especially The Mummy Returns, which has some of the most laughably bad CGI ever. It's almost on the level of a so bad it's good type of movie. And this one definitely has a lot of that, and I think it does it probably the best out of all 3 films of the original Mummy movies, not including the last one we'll get to in 2008. But this one definitely delivers a lot of what it promises. I think Dwayne Johnson definitely shows his screen presence that he would later come to have in the years to come. I mean, this was his first major leading film role, even though he was just in The Mummy Returns, and that was kind of the film that introduced everybody to him, if you weren't watching the WWE at the time. Or even the WWF, what it was called, because, of course, you know the story about the WWF, they had to change the name because World Wildlife Federation threatened to sue them if they didn't, so World Wrestling Federation became World Wrestling Entertainment. I think this was just around the time before they eventually decided to change the name on that. So that's always kind of a fun fact to bring up here. But you got a decent cast here. Kelly Hu, Grant Heslov, of course, one of George Clooney's main producers on his movies. Michael Clark Duncan is in the movie as well. It definitely has that feel that it's coming from the same universe as the Mummy movies are. And maybe not as silly as over the top as those movies, but goofy enough in its own way where it makes it and warrants itself for a very entertaining film, at least in this first film, because of course we had to keep making prequels and sequels to this because, you know, we really need prequels of a prequel. And those movies that came out on DVD afterwards are not really all that good, and I've seen a couple of them and I've immediately regretted doing so, but The Scorpion King is at least fun. It does show what Dwayne Johnson's star power would eventually become down the road. And it shows that he's got a lot of charisma and a lot of potential as an actor, as like I said, we'll see down the road. And it fits in the same mold as the other 2 Mummy movies. They're fun movies. They're not meant to be taken seriously whatsoever. They're just there to be good, fun times when it matters the most. And I think The Scorpion King does just as good enough a job as you can ask for so much. And probably the last thing Chuck Russell ever did as a director that I actually really liked, too, So that is The Scorpion King. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, Sandra Bullock starring in the psychological thriller Murder by Numbers.
Let's arrange the world. We will.
With every clue,
Critical science, good for you.
the evidence is leading her
Where were you last Thursday night?
I was with a study group.
closer to a killer
You sure they didn't suspect anything?
and further from the truth.
He doesn't fit the profile.
Yeah, the profile doesn't fit the profile.
They'll have their work cut out for me.
Hi, Ryan Gosling. It's one of Ryan Gosling's earliest film roles, him and Ben Chaplin. And Ryan Gosling in this movie plays a Californian high school's coolest kid, who secretly teams up with another rich kid, played by Ben Chaplin, in class, brilliant nerd Justin Bonaparte Pendleton. I mean, clearly I can't see why he's getting beat up all the time, but whose erudition, especially in forensic matters, allows them to plan elaborately perfect murders just for the kick, for which they set up Richard's marijuana supplier, their school janitor Ray Feathers, as a psychotic serial killer. The case is assigned to detectives, including Casey Mayweather, played by Sandra Bullock, who carries a sequoia-sized chip on the shoulder from her previous life, and her brilliant new partner, who just transferred from the Vice Squad. They can work together as well, and even fit romantically, but fall fallout over different professional attitudes towards the investigation. When the captain and her understandably vindictive, abusive ex soon ban her from what she disobeys instructions at hand to her, will the plotting boys both dig classmate Lisa Mills? Their unnatural bond comes under stress. Will it break along the hard-pressed police to bring him down? I'm reading this off of Wikipedia. This not Wikipedia, IMDb. Sometimes these synopses make no sense whatsoever. I think the people that write this down clearly do not have an idea of how to properly put paragraphs together, because this is the second time in the last couple of weeks what I've looked on here, and like some of the things they put in here make no sense whatsoever on the way that they're putting it together here. Like I get what they're trying to say, but like it's the way that they're saying it is just all over the place. But yeah, Murder by Numbers, and should be very interesting. Should be. I mean, Sandra Bullock doesn't usually take a lot of bad movies, but this is one of those times. And it's got a good director behind it too, Babette Schroeder, who did Reversal of Fortune, and he also did some other notable films: Sleeping with a Single White Female, Barfly, just mentioned Reversal of Fortune, Desperate Measures, Kiss of Death. Films that were somewhat successes in their own right, but most of them were not very good. And this is one of those ones that just feels like a really bad procedural movie mixed in with a mix of trying to be somewhat of a dark psychotic comedy too, because there's moments in here where it's just like, why is this even in here? There's a whole sequence where where Sandra Bullock's character is attacked by an angry baboon, and the way it's presented, I don't know if they thought this was going to be like a comedy or something, because that looks way too comedic to be in a movie like this. I mean, that just seems like a scene that comes out of nowhere, and there's nothing about this story that's really all that interesting when you really look at it. I mean, it's obvious who the bad guy, who the villains are, who the killers are, and nothing about this makes any sense whatsoever. It's a dull, boring movie that you can easily see coming from a mile away. You can figure out who's working for who, why they want Sandra Bullock off the case so much, and it's just, there's no real meat to the story. There's nothing about it here that makes this worth watching in the end, even after the first time. And Sandra Bullock can do so much better than this, and it just feels like they didn't give her much to do here. Just be the main character in this story that doesn't really have much of an intrigue to it. But, hey, you also get to work with this young guy named Ryan Gosling. We think he's going to go places. And, I don't know. To me, it didn't work. It's a movie that left me kind of bored and dull when it was all said and done. It was just like, there was nothing really there. And at 2 hours long, it runs way too long. It's dragging to something that you obviously know what's going to happen, and it just didn't really fly with me when it was all said and done. It's not a very good movie. It's a really lackluster film that has a lot of talented people being wasted on something that really needed another rewrite to really make something special out of it. But other than that, though, it's just another generic psychological thriller. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our last movie here. The biggest surprise success of the entire weekend, even though it was not the #1 movie, what would follow afterwards makes this very interesting. So let's take a look at My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So yeah, My Big Fat Greek Wedding is certainly a very interesting success story. It first premiered at the American Film Market in February 2002. It was picked up by IFC Films, and was released in theaters on this particular weekend, April 19th. Didn't do like gangbuster business. I mean, it still brought in almost over $500,000 in only 108 theaters, which is not that bad of a showing for that. But then all of a sudden, the film started to grow a little bit of a following to it, and it took a while too, because for months nobody really knew what was going on, because this thing barely cracked the top 10, and it wasn't until about 3 weeks later when it actually made its first $1 million, and then all of a sudden, like around July, late July, early August, if you looked at the box office, you start to notice this little film called My Big Fat Greek Wedding slowly but surely climbing the top of the charts. I mean, this is one of those unusual successes where its success didn't come right from the get-go. It waited several months before it finally got the eventual success that it would eventually become. Like in late July, it started making in like $2 million a week and $3 million a weekend. You know, finally around Labor Day weekend, it finally got this massive $14 million opening, and it brought its like total up to. It made over $100 million without ever cracking the top 10. I mean, the top spot of the weekend, and it stayed #1 it stayed in the top 10 for much of the year. Like, we don't usually see movies do this anymore. Like, you know, going back to the days of, like, E.T. and Home Alone, like, you know, that used to be common, but, like, in 2002, a movie to do this type of a success is very, very hard to do, and it stuck around for a long, long time. It was in theaters for an entire year, and it's literally its last weekend brought in $27 in one theater, which isn't really all that spectacular when you think about it. But but it ended on a $241 million domestic run, which is awe-inspiring to think about, and made over $368 million. This little movie that really came out of nowhere to do the money that it did and have this longevity that it did. It's pretty amazing to think about, and it's so much so that they literally did a TV series on CBS, which premiered and was gone by the time the movie was finally moving out of theaters. Like, this thing lasted only a few episodes and was canceled the same week the movie finally fell out of theaters. Like, this thing died pretty quickly. I mean, that's how long it took them to put this together, that show together, and that's how successful the movie was. So you have a story here where you have Nia Vardalos, who is a young Greek-American woman who falls in love with a non-Greek, played by John Corbett, and struggles to get her family to accept her while she comes to terms with her heritage and cultural identity. And this is directed by Joel Zwick, who would later go on to direct stuff like Fat Albert. And you know, this is a movie that, on paper, doesn't really look anything too significant. Doesn't look like anything that's really, you know, all that special or anything. But in a way, it kind of feels like a little bit of a television sitcom. Like, this is the type of show that would probably be seen on, like, is maybe on CBS, or even like a Wonder Years type of show on ABC. Like, if ABC really wanted to tap into that market. But the great thing about it is that it had a lot of charm to it. I mean, Nia Vardalos shows that she's got a lot of chops as a writer overall. So, like, writer and an actress, like, she shows what she can do with this particular movie here, that she does have range to her, and she actually does have a lot there where she can actually make this material work. I mean, she created this off of a 45-minute monologue workshop when she was working at HBO, and she was doing this on stage in a one-woman show on Broadway, off-Broadway, I think it was, but yeah, it was actually, and Tom Hanks, who was one of the producers on this, saw this and thought, this would be a good idea to make a movie out of it, and sure enough, here we go, we have it right here, and it also works because you have such a great cast to work off each other. I mean, Nia Vardalos and John Corbett, they work off each other very well, and you also have Lainey Kazan, Michael Constantine, Andrea Martin, Luis Mandalore, Joey Fatone, Gia Carides, Ian Gomez, Jane Eastwood. I mean, there's a lot of very talented people in this movie, and a movie that could be so cheesy and so, you know, not that interesting whatsoever, it turns out to be a delightfully fun little comedy that knows exactly who it's trying to appeal to, but knows it can appeal to the people who kind of are against the ideas of against the typical type of a movie that this would sell to. I mean, people that, you know, a generic romantic comedy, but there actually is a lot of charm to it because you do like the characters, you do like the comedy. Like, it's amazing what they're able to do with Windex in this movie. Like, Windex in this thing is probably one of the biggest laughs of the entire movie. The different ways they try to use it on different things. It's just like, it's amazing that this movie did as well as it did, and actually finds a lot of charm to it that actually makes me say, you know, I'm glad I saw this, because this is actually a delightful little comedy here, and it's a really good film. It's a solidly made film that, of course, was destroyed because they tried to franchise it. I'm not just talking about the TV series. I'm talking about the fact that they made sequels that came out not too long ago. We had a second one in 2016 and a third one in 2023, which were definitely not good movies. In fact, they were basically just retreads of this particular film, and I think they were only made because Nia Vardalos doesn't have anything really to do after is because anything that she didn't really have a whole lot of success after this movie came out. I mean, like, she tried to do some other things, like there was Connie and Carla she also wrote, which was not that great of a movie. She did My Life in Ruins, which was not a great movie. She co-wrote the script for Larry Crown, which was such a disappointment. I think the only thing I ever saw her in that I actually really liked was For a Good Time Call, which is a criminally underrated movie which features Ari Grainer and also Seth Rogen's girlfriend, as I believe his wife at the time, Lauren Miller. Well, they're still together. Lauren Miller. Great movie that's criminally underrated. If you have not seen For a Good Time Call, seek that one out because it is definitely worth the watch. But yeah, other than that, though, there really is not a whole lot she's done since then. I mean, My Big Fat Greek Wedding was that literal one-hit wonder for her, and she was just like struggling to find anything else to really get her name out there. And it's a shame because she does have comedic presence to her. She does have the chops to make it work. But with those sequels, I just feel like she was kind of forced to do it because she literally had nothing else to go with, and nobody was really giving her the opportunity to really do anything with it. And like, I don't know, like, it just, like, I think her career really has unfortunately not lived up to the promise that this movie had intended for her, but at least the first movie was still a very solid film. And avoid the fact that the spawned a franchise which puts this up there with The Hangover and Trolls and Fantastic Beasts are some of the most pointless franchises of all time. But the first movie is a delightfully charming movie, and it still holds up even after all these years. Over 20 years later, it still holds up very well. It's still very funny. It's still very creative. It's a delightful little romantic comedy. I'm glad I got to see it when I did, and I'm glad I got to see what everyone was talking about. It is a very fun movie. It's a little too formulaic, but it works perfectly well for what it is, and I really like it for just that. So, the first, I would say I recommend the first My Big Fat Greek Wedding by a long shot. Everything else, yeah, you can just kind of skip all those other ones, but watch the first one, though. And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. The next time we meet, we'll take a look at 2 more movies, including the return of Jason Voorhees and Jason X, and we also have Angelina Jolie in the romantic comedy Life or Something Like It. So 2 films we'll look at next time, but until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please just play this on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. Now, don't go too far away, because coming up after I post this, new Time About the Movies flashback will be up with a look at the one new release that came out on May 20th, 1988, George Lucas's follow-up to Star Wars and Ron Howard's follow-up to Cocoon, Willow. So we'll take a look at that right after this.